Hey everyone, this is Cameron, the co-host and editor of Renegade Animation on renegadepopculture.com. If you like what we do, please give us a like, a follow, and a rating on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to us. And maybe give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. We are where podcasts can be found. If you can, consider supporting our Patreon. That way we can keep doing what we love, and that's talking about the exhausting, mind-blowing, expansive world of animation. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
And everyone's favorite Crazy Lemur, Bree.
Hello.
And yeah, today is going to be a more relaxed episode. We still have some Annecy business to get to, but we really just want to, since we're around the halfway point of the year, we basically just want to talk about how 2026 is going in the world of animation. But to pick up where we left off, Cameron, you were the only one of us who saw the sequel to the Chimney movie. So why don't we start from there?
All right, so for context, in 2020, released in the US in 2021, there was a CGI animated film from Studio 4C, the gods of animation that they are, called Poupelle of Chimney Town. It was based off of a storybook made by a Japanese actor, and it was surprisingly really solid and whimsical, about a young boy who lived in a world called Chimney Town, a town constantly covered in clouds, smog, and, well, smoke from the chimneys, run by a evil dictator who basically wanted to keep capitalism alive and killed off anyone who spoke up or against him, which included the young lead's father, who then comes back through magic and whimsy as this junk-like entity named Poupelle. And you find out that, the reason why the evil ruler is evil is because the person who ruled before him was going to make, a type of currency that would evaporate over time. Basically getting rid of capitalism and the need for money. And, of course, the bad guy's like, but I'm greedy and evil. But anyway, it was a really charming, sweet little fantasy movie about a kid learning to move on and to keep pushing forward in life after the passing of his father with the help of the magical entity known as Poupelle. The sequel, Chimney Town, Frozen in Time, continues off relatively shortly after that. Everything's much better. Everything's not covered in smoke and smog. People can actually eat the food from outside of their realm, so it's not all just gross and disgusting. And yet, our lead is struggling to move on from losing his friend, Poupelle. And after some wacky shenanigans happen, he ends up in a very Alice in Wonderland-like situation, falling through a water fountain, only to then end up in a upside-down world. It's not purgatory, per se, or at least they kind of don't describe it as that, even though it is basically, he encounters this big fluffy cat who is whose main job is to shepherd souls, and particularly clocks across the river Styx, I assume. And Poupelle and the cat end up in this weird town where all time has stopped. And from the request of the Queen of Ashes, I think that's what her character's name was, to find a means to fix the clock to keep time moving forward. And if I had a nickel for every time I watched an animated film this year that had two diverging storylines that all meet up in one, at once to reveal the big twist of it all, I'd have 2 nickels. And so on and so forth, It's not a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice this year. Because just like the Hong Kong animated feature Another World, Chimney Town Frozen in Time's big plot-driven conflict is the giant clock that looms over the town is stopped because the man in charge of keeping the clock moving is stricken by the fact that he has lost the love of his life and refuses to let the clock hands move to midnight, because at that point he would have to accept that she is no longer alive and move on, keeping everything else in a stagnant state of, existence, per se. It is not as grand in scale as I'm probably making it out to be, but throughout the movie, it is funny because you're every once in a while it'll cut to this tiefling looking man. And if you don't know what a tiefling is, Jester from the Mighty Nine, from Critical Role and such, horned individuals, devil people and such. And he meets this, I guess I would say it's like a forest spirit. And it's just like they fall in love, they're young. And during a tragic fire caused by this huge lava and smoke monster, he thinks she dies. And he is so stricken by grief that he refuses to let the clocks move forward. And it parallels with our main character, who refuses to move forward because he cannot think about living through life unless he can somehow bring back Pupel from death or whatever. Which is so funny because Pupel, for being like a major driving force of the first movie, is barely in this movie. He doesn't even come to the other world that our lead is stuck in. He's basically like a pile of junk because that's what he was before he came to life in the first movie. And he only really has a few speaking lines, but most of them are flashback. He only has like speaking lines that are new to the movie at the very literal end. And I say that because while this film is kind of disjointed, it's weirdly paced, and the side characters aren't as memorable, they do try to do, like I said, that kind of Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz thing where you meet characters from the main town, like Chimney Town, that are in the upside down world where time has stopped. But they only do that really with two characters, these repairmen who are constantly eating candy and are on like the verge of figuring out why their contraptions aren't working. But even then, they find out that, like, they know that the clock that looms over the entire town, which is a really cool visual. I mean, imagine seeing, like, the face of a clock looming over above a city and such.
Yeah, that does seem like a cool visual aesthetic.
And the whole movie is about how, like, the thematic elements that drive this movie are the fact that the shorthand and longhand on a clock are meeting at different points in time, but they never quite meet up around the 11 o'clock area until midnight when they are reunited behind one another because they're moving at different speeds and such. And it's a genuinely sweet movie, even though, like I said, it's not the best paced. It's some of the CGI designs look a little clunky because of how thin they are. It's like looking at video games of early cell shading, and they were like, I want to make a cool, tall, lanky character, and it's just like, looks a little clunky. But anyway, it is a genuinely sweet movie that I am debating if it fumbles its plot, like its themes of moving on and just accepting that loved ones will be gone. But bringing back the clock masters, or whatever his character's name is, the love of his life back, the little tree forest spirit. Because the plot twist is, she didn't actually die. She just escaped back into the forest that's below the city where time has stopped. And she just thinks that he'll move on and forget about me, even though he hasn't ever forgotten about her. Which, I don't know. It's like, you probably all have seen like a movie or a show that undoes a character's like, I've come to acceptance that life is just what it is, and then they undo it just to give them a happy ending.
I'm pretty sure South Park made fun of that with I think it was like Kyle's parents getting divorced.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
No, it was Stan's.
That's right.
Oh, right.
Yeah, then it's like, hey Stan, come on, we're getting back together, okay, let's go. And it's like, no, wait a minute. But I mean, this movie isn't using realistic logic. It's very fairy tale, dreamlike logic, which I'm fine with. It's very sweet that they get back together, and that the fact that the lead at the end does reunite with Pupel, who is brought back to life. Like, it is sweet, but part of me wonders if it would have been better if they just let the two characters stay dead. You know? I guess it depends on the execution and how you two would have felt about it. I will say, from the screener I had of this movie, it must have been from a either near finished version or something like that, because the translated title does not say Frozen in Time. It says Clockwork Town, working title. And during the whole sequence where they go to the forest that's underneath the Frozen in Time town, there are obvious moments where they haven't fully put in the textures yet.
Interesting.
So it was kind of weird. Like, at first I was like, oh, this is a stylistic decision and such. But then you see that every other shot during that sequence is outside of one or two moments are completely unrendered with textures. It's just like basic CG and such. So it was really weird because I'm sure if you watched the normal version of this movie that got released, I think in March of this year in Japan, it would have looked finished. So I'm wondering when they got this. But I still liked it. I still felt emotionally satisfied with it. And it was sweet for the lead to reunite with Pupel, even though it was like at the very end. Because the cat character, who was like the straight-laced person of the bunch, and she's fine as a character, but you don't quite understand what her arc was throughout this whole thing outside of like being like nicer and not as stoic and soulless and such. Which is a shame because if they just brought Pupel with him to this kind of like Alice in Wonderland like world, I think it would have been better. Or at least had more time for our lead and Pupel to be together and such, instead of just through flashbacks and such. They even reused the same theme song from the first movie for this one at the very end, which I can't tell is a callback or not, but I guess it is. But it's just like, you didn't make like a new song for it outside of the one that plays in the credits. It was weird. But I think it will get brought over. I'm sure Shout Factory will probably bring it over because I don't know what the deal with the original distributor of Pupel of Chimney Town is. It's the fact that the first movie had like a really big cast of character actors as the voice actors. There was Tony Hale as Pupel. The kid's dad was voiced by Stephen Root, among other character actors and such. So this one, I don't know who would pick it up. I feel like maybe G Kids would pick it up. Maybe. Like I said, 11 Arts, I don't know what's going on with that company, but they've obviously lost the rights to a silent voice since G Kids is redistributing that movie and such. So
yeah, sounds like G Kids might just be like, yeah, we'll do both movies eventually down the road.
Right. And it's weird because I can't say, go watch it, because there's no way to watch it unless you have a screener for it. Or you live in Japan. So, yeah, it's definitely, I think, maybe the weakest next to Blaze out of the screeners that we got. That's only because We Are Aliens and Julian go extremely hard with their stories and visual styles and such.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about We Are Aliens, but I should probably warn the audience that if you thought Decorado or Another World were bleak, this one is brace yourself.
Me depresso.
Yeah, extremely. Like, what is with animation this year so far where we've watched 3 movies that are utterly depressing in their subject matter, and they're each depressing in their own fresh way. I still loved We Are Aliens, but part of me was just like, oh my god, I need animation to get happy again.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. So, We Are Aliens is one of those animated features that played at the Cannes Film Festival and at Annecy. Still no distributor talk, which I'm amazed by because I feel like G Kids or Neon would be perfect for this. I would say A24, but A24 is too busy.
Can go suck a bag of dicks.
Yeah, they're too busy investing into AI and such to care.
To replace storyboard artists.
Yeah. They could say, you don't have to use this, but they're basically saying you better use this because we're replacing storyboard artists. So, go suck it, A24. So, We Are Aliens was directed by Kohei Katawaki, and I think this was his first feature debut. Yes. And he is also the writer for this movie, which I have to assume he was working through some things to get this movie made, because here's the plot synopsis. One summer in 3rd grade, a quiet boy named Tsubasa meets Gyotaro, a boy everyone in class looked up to, and the two become close friends. Within their small world, they share irreplaceable moments until a small incident suddenly tears them apart. If you watch the trailer for this movie, you would see that it uses like a very distinct form of rotoscope animation, which I think makes this movie work so much better than it looking like a traditional anime production.
Yeah, same.
Because the whole thematic element of We Are Aliens is that, one, there are no literal aliens. Or we say literal as in they're not from outer space. The alien element of this movie comes in the form of both metaphorical and literal interpretations of alienation, where the incident that drives our two, like Gyotaro and Tsubasa apart, is what sends them down two entirely different routes in their lives. And the movie focuses heavily on bullying, harassment, and how doing so causes people who are emotionally vulnerable to this kind of stuff to isolate themselves from the rest of the world and such. And this movie is also equally incredibly unsettling at points. There are many moments where I had to question, are we watching a horror movie? Like, are we actually watching an alien horror movie? I mean, what did y'all think about the more horror aspects of this movie?
As a horror fan, I was kind of loving it, but also definitely not expecting it, especially the number of jump scares that genuinely got to me.
I don't know. I guess jump scares don't get me every time, but honestly, the more horror aspect to me, and maybe this is because I'm more of a psychological horror person, not really a gore person. I'll admit, I'm not the biggest horror person in the world. It's not that I'm scared of it. I don't know. It's not my cup of tea. The way those kids acted, holy shit.
Yeah.
And this is why I think it helps with the rotoscope animation, because with rotoscoping, you get to capture all the awkward, flawed movements that humans have. You don't get to do the, straightforward, everyone runs the same. No, we don't. That's actually something I really like about this movie. The rotoscope animation and the acting from the kids captures perfectly how weird and lanky that sometimes kids run. And
I mean, it's just such a sense of uncanniness. And I think that's, for me, what the horror aspect is that these feel like real people. And it's just so unsettling.
It's the fact that instead of just doing it's not a, what was that movie we watched last year that was really freaking good? 100 Meters, where they have a base anime aesthetic. This one uses a more realistic look to everyone. So that means everything from the visual, the art direction to the movements, just looked creepier with how everything is framed and shot. And it's also an oddly interesting companion piece to have next to Look Back.
Yes.
Just because it follows the friendship of two kids, and then something breaks them apart, and then their lives go into entirely different directions, for better and for worse.
And not only that, but even in the story structure, they do the thing where the story is told from two different perspectives.
Exactly. And it's really sad because it's a lot of this is caused by, unfortunately, misunderstandings. And just one incident causes, I think it was Gyotaro, to be isolated and alienated from everyone else because everyone's just look at that creepy, jerky weirdo. And that unfortunately follows him through the rest of his life. And while Tsubasa is just, he goes through life kind of troubled but moderately okay, where Gyotaro gets the short end of the stick because he was never really able to recover from the complete isolation of his peers, which really shows it's a good reminder that while we as adults can be incredibly heartlessly cruel to people, kids, because I don't think they have a moral compass yet or understanding, can be incredibly horrible to one another.
Yeah, kids can be monsters, and understandably so because their brains haven't fully developed, but in the moment when you are a kid being completely cast out like that, it's it feels so much bigger because your world is so much smaller. Things like that just feel so much bigger.
Exactly. It's the fact that, like, unfortunately, one of the boys, like, well, it's sad because Tsubasa finds out way too late that it was all just a mistake, a misunderstanding, and Gyotaro was sorry for his actions that he caused Tsubasa, and only to later find out that, like, yeah, he apologized and said, I hope we get to hang out again. And kudos to this film's credit, there is never quite a closure for both of them. Gyotaro basically goes through life impoverished and, like, just destroyed by the world, only to then miraculously reunite with Tsubasa and almost kill him at points. And there's that great callback of, like, because again, this is how kids can be weirdly cruel. They're like, what's the worst needle you can think of? And Tsubasa's like, I'm going to make a saw blade like one. But Gyotaro makes one with a rounded edge where it's like you don't know how hard you have to go to penetrate the skin because it's challenging. So you just keep pushing down on it. And it's like, did I have any of these thoughts as a kid? It's like, I'm worried now. It's like, holy cow, who thinks of this stuff?
Seriously.
But I think, like, Brie, what did you think about the fact that they do try to have some kind of closure between them, but the movie says unapologetically, like, the actions are done.
It's unapologetically real.
Yeah.
Like, you can't undo it.
You can't sitcom third act wrap this shit up.
I mean, if anything, it's a story about life, real life. Not to say that you can't reconcile in real life, but more often than not, people just graduate and you don't really see those people again.
And sometimes it's just they don't get over it. And even though, like, at that whole tragic chase sequence where Gyotaro's just like, give me back my youth. And Tsubasa calls him out saying, like, you could have gotten over it, but you didn't. Why is it my fault? And it's just like, Tsubasa, you caused the inciting incident. What the hell are you talking about? And I do think that's what makes this movie work, but I also understand why it's going to be, well, alienating to many animation fans who we do call out for wanting this kind of stuff, but then being like, oh, wait, no, this is not what I wanted. We wanted, like, action in our adult animation, which, depending on what show you watch, it's like, was the sacrifice worth it? Especially with Invincible and such. So, I mean, it's uncomfortable. Like, it's probably the most uncomfortable animated film I've watched this year. And that's saying something, especially with the way that Another World ends with our two leads reincarnating as a mother and son during World War II. I've also seen some people, especially our friend of the podcast, Ruben, say that the final sequence where you do find out that Gyotaro finally at one point got his act together. Because there was this one point in the movie, where I thought through the taxi cab window that I thought I saw a body hanging off in the distance, which I thought that's what happened. But assumedly, I don't think that's what, I might have just mistaken the image of it, I guess. But, like, what do you think about the ending of it all, where they're, like, tangentially, like, I'll see you again? And
when they're yelling, like, from their car windows.
Yeah, they just happen to be next to one another. They recognize each other. And Gyotaro goes like, see you later, which is a callback to when, like, it was like the day their friendship was at its high point, where they're like, I'll see you again. I'll see you again. Like, it's sweet. It's endearing. It does wrap it up nicely. But yeah, it's like, I don't know how one would feel after another after said, like, hey, dude, you almost murdered me. I feel like I'd be a little more traumatized by that than, like, heartwarmed.
Yeah, I think, like, that's about as close as we're going to get to any sort of closure, but I can understand it feeling a little bit tone deaf to have that as the ending, when before that, as you pointed out, yeah, they were literally at each other's throats.
Because what you find out about Gyotaro is after he kind of gets his nonsense together and becomes a taxi driver, he does reunite and reconnect with a friend of his from school, the heavyset guy with the afro. And the guy's like, yeah, man, you always made us laugh. I liked you. Like, he did have friends. It's just Gyotaro really wanted his friendship with Tsubasa to be back together, like, to be strong again. When Tsubasa just saw Gyotaro after hearing that he supposedly maybe cut a kid's eyelid because of, like, pulling on a book, I think, if I recall. But it's just it's tragic. So in some ways, I can kind of see why the director did that ending as they did, because it's just like, listen, they're not going to be friends again. In that final, it's more of like a final farewell than they're magically friends again, because they don't like get out of the car and hug. They just drive off on their own ways. They very see you again, Fast and Furious. Mike, were there anything that you wanted to like? Were there any major takeaways that you got from this movie? Because it's a very unique movie in terms of what we've watched so far this year.
I think this is a good movie to. This is going to sound weird, but it might be a good movie to show, your kids. Just so I guess you can like show them what like the worst case scenario that like bullying and harassment can that's the road that you can go down, because you never really know as a kid how your actions are going to affect someone else. And as uncomfortable of a watch as it may be, it might be an important one to watch.
I feel like, well, I mean, like, good luck getting any kid to sit down for this. I think they'd be horrified by the visual style of this movie.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
And it is very mature for its subject matter, and I like it for that reason, that it is uncompromising. It's because, here's the thing, I've watched 2 feature debuts from Japan this year. One of them was Jinsei, which is made by a guy who basically went the Angaku R sound route of limited animation, some rotoscoping, tracing, and stuff, but very limited experimental art house storytelling about a man going through multiple lives, careers, and it's about grief, careerism, violence, abuse, loss, and love. But I can't really recommend people watch it, because I don't know if people would be bored out of their wits, or since they're like, it's an animated film from Japan, that means it's going to have good animation. And it's like, no. It, like, Jinsei is more like those China, Illinois ads that you would see before China, Illinois got turned into, like, an actual show on Adult Swim. Like, when they have those, like, limited animation tidbits in between the shows and such, or the commercial breaks. And it's a hard movie to sit through if you don't quite know what you're getting into with Jinsei. With We Are Aliens, it's definitely, I would say, more approachable as a movie, but it's definitely going to be the one you'll feel the most, like, depressed watching. I don't know how anyone can come out of this, or will come out of this, like, either heartbroken or depressed. We Are Aliens captures really well the elements of being a child, and how you would act, how you would move, the tribalism that comes with being a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, you want to be with a group of friends who are laughing and having fun. You do not want to feel like the odd one out.
No.
And it's, like, I just think that's what makes it a very compelling watch, and why the ending does work. I mean, like, Brie, what did you think about the ending to this movie? Did you think it actually thematically fit? Because we were just saying how...
You know what? Honestly, I'm kind of torn. Like, on the one hand, like, I kind of feel like it's the most satisfying, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of tonal whiplash, like, it just feels a little too light, but it does kind of feel like a bookend. It's like, maybe it sticks the landing like 75% of the way, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like we said, it's not really like them reuniting. They're still going their separate ways. They're not going to be friends anymore.
I agree with that. I feel like for, like, the audience.
Oh, yeah, no,
like,
understandable.
thematically, like, I get it. I don't disagree. And, you know, going like, well, like, what the hell are we doing here? But I don't know, man.
Like I said, I think it works a little better since we see that Gyotaro does find friendship and connection later in life with that one kid who made that, like, hideout area. But, yeah, I could see why it would be, like, you either will like the ending or you won't. Which then leads to this question. Who the hell is going to pick this up?
This feels like a Neon movie.
Like, on one hand, G-Kids is probably going to pick it up because of the Toho connection that I think, Mike, you pointed out.
Yep.
But Neon seems like this would be more of their art house thing. Because as much as we all love art house, indie, experimental stuff, there's a limit to that kind of appeal. And you're just going to have to really accept that a movie's not going to be for everyone, which is fine. Not every movie should be for everyone. Because once you try to cater for everyone, you then cater for no one.
This is like a shot in the dark. I don't think this is gonna happen. But do you think out of the blue, Crunchyroll might pick this up?
I don't know, because Crunchyroll is on, like, we talked about this in the last episode. They're on, like, the big expansive, like, we're trying to buy up other projects and invest into others because, one, they have to if they're in France. But they're doing a lot of, like, expanding upon doing anime still, but
Almost kind of like they're going back to their core, like, mid-2000 Funimation days. Where, like, Funimation also, like, I have to bring this up. Yeah, they picked up, like, weirder projects and side stuff, but for the longest time, they also distributed Degrassi, The Next Generation on home video.
God, I forgot about that.
that is indeed weird.
So, they were Drake enablers.
Yeah.
Also, they did that, like, one Tony Hawk animated movie back in, like, the early 2000s.
I remember that. God, what a little weird time capsule made by the same people who did Reboot, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, God. And then they would go on to make the Ratchet and Clank movie, which I don't blame them for that movie sucking. That's a executive meddling.
Yeah, I think that was just a movie that was always destined to be a pile of suck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which it didn't have to. Ratchet and Clank is a great franchise, but meh. We now move on to the big debate of the night that has to revolve around the most odd of movies to revolve this around. Minions and Monsters.
This delighted me when you told me this in our DM, Cam. Because I feel, like, so vindicated.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a weird little story in connection, and this is me doing the whole It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme of Charlie connecting the dots. So, in 2022, what was the first Pixar movie out the gate? Turning Red. It was praised heavily, considered a hit, was loved for being a fresh approach to the Pixar formula. What comes out after that?
Would it be every animation YouTuber's most favoriteest movie of all time?
Lightyear, baby. So, Lightyear comes out. It confuses audiences. It kind of goes with a tepidly positive but mostly mixed response.
And it's a big-ass bomb.
Yeah, no matter how good that original trailer was, which I thought was a really good trailer until they did the final trailer where they really showed what the movie was about. And it was
and then everyone went, oh.
I remember that. So, like, I'm sorry not to dunk on Lightyear because I don't actually hate it that much. But it is like, you watch that great cover of Starman throughout that whole, like, weird, slightly more adult approach to Lightyear. And then you watch the, like, oh, so this is like every other Pixar movie ever. Okay, fine.
You know, if we're thinking back on it, Lightyear is kind of patient zero when it comes to this modern era of, like, Disney mediocrity.
Honestly, this is when I was truly starting to be, like, disillusioned with Disney. Like, even more so than usual. I was like, wow, Disney and Pixar let this through. And then Strange World came out, and I was like, wow, Disney let this through. And all the way up to 2024 when Moana 2 came out, I was just like, man, this sucked. Oh my god. So after Lightyear came out, we got, like, Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe and the Bob's Burgers movie. And Mike, I think you would remember this. Both times we talked about those two movies on the podcast, I said in distressed conspiratorial worry, am I about to give Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe in the Bob's Burgers movie a higher ranking on my best to worst list than a Pixar movie? And yes, I did that year.
Yep.
Move forward to this year. What comes out first?
Hoppers.
Considered a huge success, very popular, beloved by many, a fresh take on the Pixar formula. What comes out in June? Toy Story 5. Met with a mostly positive, tepid to mixed response.
A little bit more financially successful, though.
Exactly.
That's like the one difference.
But what comes out in July? Minions and Monsters. I go to my theater. I sit down there, 10:45 in the morning screening. After an hour and 90 minutes passes or so, I walk out of that theater going, am I about to give Minions and Monsters a higher ranking than Toy Story 5? Yes. Hear it now. Give me all the hate you want from you Disney adults or you biased Disney guzzlers. I liked Minions and Monsters. No. I loved Minions and Monsters more than Toy Story 5.
I don't know why you're acting like this is controversial, Cameron. Because as soon as we saw the first trailer drop, we knew this was how it was going to pan out.
It's just weird, though, don't you think, in some regards? Because for the longest time, everyone was mostly expecting every Illumination movie to be just kind of financially successful, safe, and just kind of at the end, at best, whatever.
I feel like I'm the one who's vindicated because more than most of our peers, I'm the one who will defend Illumination the hardest.
I think I would too, because my first experience with Illumination is, I remember, and this movie theater doesn't even exist anymore, I saw Despicable Me at like the shittiest fucking like movie theater in like Ocean City, New Jersey. It was like 3 screens. The floors were perpetually sticky. I don't even think they had surround sound. It was just like stereo. You could like barely hear anything.
Was this in a mall or like a standalone
No,
theater?
on the fucking boardwalk. Oh yeah, no, this is a real cinema experience. It was the same theater that I saw Jurassic Park 3 in.
Nice.
Opening weekend. Which, honestly, that was the best way to experience that, because that was a sold-out showing. It was by the way, Ocean City's a dry town, big air quotes, so, like, yeah, a bunch of people, hi, I'm 9 years old, and then, like, the Barney scene played, and everyone laughed its ass off, but I actually had, like, some really good memories of that movie theater, but thankfully the architecture still exists. It's actually, like, a Mank and Manco's, pizza place now, but I kind of am sad that my little piece of shit, Ocean movie theater is gone. But that was my first exposure to Illumination. Like, I thought Despicable Me was incredibly charming, and, like, every entry I've seen of Despicable Me and, like, the Illumination stuff that I have seen, I was like, you know what? That was kind of decent. I really enjoyed it. I don't think there's, like, an Illumination movie that I've ever been mad at. But there's been Pixar movies that I've been mad at.
Well, it's like, for me, I'm never the biggest Illumination hater. I'm always just like, they had a really good story idea. I wish they'd focus on it more, but otherwise it was fine. There's nothing to get mad over. People need to stop acting like Illumination's the second coming of Satan.
It's not even close.
Like, we already have Hollywood bad guys, and they're not Illumination or the Minions. It's people like David Zaslav and Harvey fucking Weinstein. It was always weird where, they were like, everyone's going to copy what Illumination does, and movies are going to become cheaper, they're going to become worse. And it's like, dude, Disney did not need to follow Illumination's footsteps to make middling, mediocre animated movies.
But here's the difference with, like, Illumination. They're cheaper because they have film credits, and they actually pay their employees.
Exactly. They're not also just getting kneecapped every step of the process by Disney executives. Being like, oh my god, is that character's hair pink? Well, that's gay. Gotta take that character out, or take that part out, or doing everything that they can to butcher Elio. So, this is the thing with this year. I feel like we're at a B to a B plus light in terms of letter grading, because we've at least had an animated film to talk about for the most part every single month, except for maybe one so far. And we're going to have another one to talk about soon because of the Avatar movie finally coming out. Holy shnikes.
That we could talk about legally.
Yes. But I feel like we've hit this kind of stagnation still with, at the very least, US animation that is not getting picked up by the foreign animation scene, because for some reason we're 2 to 3, maybe 4 festivals in, and G-Kids, Neon, or Netflix are not picking up anything. I mean, at least Netflix picked up In Waves from Cannes, but G-Kids has been quiet. And I don't know why.
This is like a little bit conspiracy theory of me, but I almost kind of wonder if part of GK's strategy is like heavy focus on Godzilla Minus Zero, which, by the way, at the time of recording this, a new trailer is supposed to drop tomorrow.
Yes.
Alrighty then. So it's just funny because there are so many animated films that I heard that were great from Khan and Annecy, and yet they're like, listen, we got the Shaun the Sheep movie, we got these new collector's edition movies for Linda, let's see, Angel's Egg, Look Back, and oh, what was the other one called? That it was like Hideaki Anno's first live action movie that he made with a small like video camera that it's funny that it's getting a 4K resolution and such.
That is hysterical, actually.
Yeah, let's see, live action movie. Not Cutie Honey, that's not it.
Oh no, that's another special one for another day.
Love and Pop.
Yep, that's the one.
And they also got, of course, Allegro Non Troppo, too, which is a good pickup, but it just seems like it's really been sluggish this year for foreign animation. Even though we've still had, like, a few pretty decent movies and such. But the US side of things has also still continued to, I think, stagnate and do that thing where, like, the more compelling stuff is at the end of the year. Well, compelling even though, we weren't really impressed with Hexed. But, like, Forgotten Island. But
we might be impressed for entirely different reasons.
Yeah, depending on how that movie turns out. But we have, Wildwood still coming out and Forgotten Island. And unfortunately, the Angry Birds movie. So.
Let's just don't talk about it. But you know what? I think there is kind of a reason, unlike both ends, both in the US and the foreign scene. As you may know, the global economy is not doing so great right now, Chris.
You don't say.
I think part of it just might be that everyone's cutting back, and I think it's just starting to hit film distribution. Like, it's not even that this year's like a bad year. I would argue that you would probably say like 2025 is a way worse year, right?
As far as the volume of movies released, yeah.
Yeah, I would say like 2024, 2025 were worse than this year. But then again, 2025 had a K-pop Demon Hunters.
Yeah, but why did I think it was 2 years ago? But I'm like, it just feels like it was all like K-pop Demon Hunters just like captured everything. The fact that the movie's still probably in the top 10 after literally a year. I mean, that's great for them, but that's also kind of a striking indictment.
Well, it's like even the Skydance animated feature Swapped was a huge viewing hit for Netflix, even though that movie's not really all that good. And 2025 had its weird elements also, like 100 Meters and Little Amelie, or the character of Rain, had huge audience turnout, at the very least on Letterboxd and such, where they were two of the most watched movies of last year. Explain that to someone who is constantly cynical about the fact that the only Japanese animated films that do well are either Ghibli or franchise films. That a movie about the 300-meter dash and a poignant autobiographical story were like two of the most watched animated films of last year. That just blows my mind a little. And with this year, there's just, I mean, again, Hoppers did well, which I'm glad, but there's nothing really like even for the movies I loved, like Decorado, Another World, Labyrinth, Blaze. But like Goat came and went. Toy Story 5, even though it's a financial hit and is doing very well, came and went. Mario Galaxy movie came and went, even though it's also a financial success. But after everyone gushed about the cameos, references, and fan service, everyone dropped that movie like a bad habit. Like, it left the discussion vortex of online film fans.
Like, maybe 3 weeks afterwards. And honestly, the only lasting impact was the whole Star Fox thing. Because not long after that, we're doing Star Fox 64 again, guys.
We're doing it again, and yet it's going to be like one of the most beloved games of the year in a year where Sony is killing its own fan base and customer base.
And Xbox can't stop slamming its stick in the car door.
Yeah, exactly. So it's weird to then see Minions and Monsters come into release, and even during its release at the Annecy Film Festival, everyone was loving it. And that's saying something, because going to the Annecy Film Festival, they're kind of persnickety about what they give high praise for over there. Or at least it's a little more critical than the Cannes Film Festival. So to then be like, interesting that a lot of early hype of this is positive, considering that you look at the tomato meter rating for their movies are not always in the highest areas, except for like Migration. I very much like that movie.
Same.
But that's also because it was Benjamin Renner who directed Ernest and Celestine. So I was going to love that movie no matter what. And for Minions, like, the biggest problem with Despicable Me was always the case of the franchise story-wise stagnated. The kids were always going to be kids. Gru and Gru's wife, which I'm sorry I forgot her name. Lucy were going to be whatever. And then they introduced a baby, like the first canonical son made by Gru, which sounds like such a weird thing to say. Like Gru just going around saying like, I made this one. And yet there was a lack of focus and story cohesion that made the latter Despicable Me movies hurt. Because I think the last time people really liked Despicable Me was the 1-2 shot of Despicable Me 2 and Minions. Because past that, everyone was like, wow, Despicable Me 3 has Gru dealing with the fact he has a brother.
He meets his twin brother.
And he deals with a total man-child of a supervillain, which was the best part of that movie. But they don't do anything with the story of the Gru and his brother. It's just kind of whatever. Minions, The Rise of Gru. They had more elements of, like, having a decent plot, but they don't really focus or take advantage of any of it.
Which I think the legacy of that movie is more gentle minions.
Gentle minions, yes.
Yes.
Exactly. And then Despicable Me 4 comes out, and I think this is the one where everyone was like, okay, I think we're starting to get a little tired of it. Even though it still made a ton of money, but still, it's like, the after effect of people getting tired of a franchise doesn't hit until a few movies after. You know, we're seeing that right now with like superhero movies and such, where people could be like, oh, well, but this movie came out, so that means people aren't tired of it. And it's like, explain Supergirl then. Which I feel bad about that movie because I was actually kind of looking forward to it. But here with Minions and Monsters, I sit down, I watch the movie, and I was loving it. I loved from the beginning to the end. Especially with, I kind of hate that I got this part spoiled for me, the George Lucas cameo at the beginning, where they're at the museum, and the tour guide's like, look, this whole section of the museum is dedicated to cinema. And like they're like, oh, look, there's Keanu Reeves from The Matrix. And here's George Lucas. And instead of it being like a wax sculpture of George Lucas, it's literally George Lucas. Be like, okay, can I come out of here now? I want to go home. And she's like, George, this installation's here for a few more weeks, so sorry. Can I at least have my phone? Oh, George, you're so silly. You'd only call the cops if you did. It's like, what is this chaotic Looney Tunes ass energy coming from this Minions movie now? And this is the energy that permeates this entire movie that makes me love it.
Yeah, that's why I love this movie too. And setting it in the 1920s was the perfect idea, because then you can make all the jokes about how the Minions are basically responsible for modern cinema as we know it. But also, and I can't take credit for this because other people have pointed out, but yeah, this is like completely in conversation with movies like Singing in the Rain or Babylon, but in the Minions formula.
This is the funny thing that I find so fascinating about this movie. Well, one of the elements I find so fascinating about it. Disney, how did Illumination beat you guys to the punch with having better handicap representation than Disney has ever been able to do with all the money and talent that they have? Illumination beat them to the punch because they were able to get a minion named who is deaf or hard of hearing and talks in sign language. Ed is great. He's a lovable character. And it's like, this is so easy. They just accept him for who he is and brings him into that whole, like, friend group of James, Henry, Ed, and to some degree and distance, Dick. I am still amazed that they were able to get away with just having a character named Dick. They even make fun of that, where it's just like, what's your name, Minion? Does the Minionese, and he's like, Richard? I don't know. You sound more like a dick.
That is such a stupid dad joke, but I kind of love it.
I mean, even in the trailer, like the teaser trailer where they're going over all the, like, Allison Janney, Trey Parker, Christoph Waltz, Jesse Eisenberg, Jeff Bridges, Zoe Dutch, Bobby Moynihan. And then they're like, but we can't forget the most important person in this movie, Dick. And it's just like, what is with this movie? I am in love with it already. And here's the thing. Here's another 2-nickel situation. Shout out to Hoppers and Minions and Monsters for both having a horrifically dark death of a queen-like character.
Oh my god.
And it's not even like James, Henry, or Ed's fault that one of the minions accidentally decapitates the queen.
Oh my god. But see, this is why I like the Illumination and the Minions, because at their core, they're very French.
Exactly. They're like, yeah, sure, we could do this. Like, it's not even like a cutaway. Like, they don't cut away or zoom in on it. They just show, like, the X on the halberd come slicing down, and the head plops down like an unfrozen ham. And they're like, Kevin, what the fuck?
That might be, well, like, it was kind of spoiled in the trailers, but just seeing it play out in the movie, that, like, one of my most underrated running gags is when something goes wrong and all the minions go, like, Brian or Chris.
Yeah, they always blame one minion because they keep finding new bosses, but then they keep inadvertently killing them. Like, the pirate captain gets yoinked by a minion trying to fish, and gets tossed behind the boat and gets eaten by sharks. Like we said, the Queen of England gets decapitated. The giant Cyclops steps on a Lego and falls into a pit of spikes. And then a mummy gets unraveled and falls to the ground as a pile of bones. And then the whole sequence when they finally find themselves in Hollywood, which, hey, if you wanted the most evil people on Earth, I feel like there has to be some kind of underhanded remark about the fact that this took place during the 1920s. And it's like, you're telling me that none of the minions found a studio executive that was evil enough to follow because of what we know about what happened to some of the greatest actors of all time?
Yeah.
But instead, the two brothers, Frank and Elwood Bright, the Bright brothers, who are the bosses of a film studio, which I'm sure are like a play on the Warner Brothers studios, who were both voiced by Jeff Bridges, and I did not capture that until I looked it up in the credits, in the voice cast later on Wikipedia. What is with Illumination movies and telling their actors to act?
I know, right?
That's so weird. They're like, hey, look, if you want your paycheck, bitch, you better work.
Like, yes, Christoph Waltz is still Christoph Waltz, but he still puts in a performance as a character, as this film director who looks kind of like Mario's cousin. And then, with a little voice alteration, Jesse Eisenberg, who plays Dort, an alien robot, who is a parody of Gort from the 1951 movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. I didn't really realize that was Jesse Eisenberg until I heard his speaking cadence come through.
Yeah, once you recognize that cadence, it's like, yeah, no, is definitely him. And fun fact, this is the second time that Zoe Dutch played his love interest.
That's weird. Movies are weird when they do that, and it's like, I understand. It's like, oh, put them together. They work so well together. And it's like, yeah, but that's typecasting's kind of specific and weird. But I get it. And then with Trey Parker so basically what happens in the movie is the minions become big in Hollywood because this is the silent era of filmmaking. So, of course, they didn't have to worry about speaking minionese, only for them to come in through the crash of Hollywood when the introduction of sound happens. Because even though they can understand minions perfectly fine, they still kick them out because they don't understand what they're saying. And this is weird, because they were obviously making fun of a Humphrey Bogart detective noir movie. Mike, did you catch that one of the characters, like the actress, says, "you bastard"?
Yeah.
I was like, someone at Universal said no notes.
What, like going back to one of the minions being named Dick, that's the kind of joke that like only Animaniacs could have gotten away with in like the 90s.
And Universal's just like, hey, as long as Dick isn't really, touching his banana, then we're fine.
Yeah. And I do love that, like, the fall of Hollywood and the Minions in Hollywood is basically when the sound era happened, which tragically did end a lot of careers. So basically what happens is James, the Minion, ends up inspired to make a monster movie and is told by Christoph Waltz's character, Max, the filmmaker, is like, you know what, you do it. Here's the very first camera I got, and you're going to just go out there and make your movie, even though you don't have a cast, budget, crew, or a union to deal with. Which, hey, that didn't stop a couple people from losing their hands and fingers or dying back then. So Hollywood has always been kind of a dangerous minefield of disasters and violence. So basically what happens is, like, one of the villains that the Minions were under was this evil wizard, and he had this magic book of summoning monsters and such. The wizard gets evaporated, and I do love, like, the animation detail that the wizard's beard was so long he has to pick it up to move. Like, again, say what you will about the Despicable Me movies, they are great character animation study pieces.
Absolutely.
Because there's so much going on with these movies, with how characters walk and move, that I would be studying these movies if I was an animator, or just having fun. So basically, they go to this factory, this shutdown factory, which is what had the... it was a reference to...
Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, like that whole sequence. Like, this movie's jam-packed with references to Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and such. And a lot of those gags that you see happen, like Buster Keaton holding on to the clock handles, is caused because the Minions were running after someone and took the ladder with them. So he's stuck up there. And Charlie Chaplin getting stuck in the machine is because of the Minions. The famous house falling down and completely missing actor is caused by the Minions. And even like Allison Janney as the tour guide in the museum does a lot of the same specific movements that Charlie Chaplin did during The Great Dictator when she was bouncing the globe around. And so basically what happens is they go back to the abandoned factory, they summon who is supposedly supposed to be Cthulhu, and he's like supposed to be this big, scary monster. But instead, we get basically the Chuck Jones or Tex Avery adaptation of Cthulhu, who is this tiny little kawaii plush version of Cthulhu, and voiced by Trey Parker. I loved this approach because this is exactly that. I forgot exactly what the specific Looney Tunes character's name was, but it's that one who was like, I think the nephew to Elmer Fudd in one short, where he's just like,
Henry Hawk.
Or no, it's the one who's like, I want an Easter egg, I want an Easter egg, I want an Easter egg, and...
Oh, right, that little shit.
Yeah, that one. And that's who this little Cthulhu-looking motherfucker reminded me of. Gooby, who then is just like, wow, so you want to make a movie. So I'm going to help you find the biggest, baddest monsters that you can get your bottom dollar for, which they don't have a dollar, but that's, it's a phrase. A term of phrase, a term of words, and all that jazz. And throughout this whole movie, they keep up with the antics from, like, very Looney Tunes antics. Like, somehow, Illumination is able to make Looney Tunes style movies better than Warner Brothers.
Which is actually
sad.
Crazy.
It's like, Warner Brothers is so ashamed of what Looney Tunes are that they have to shape them into things that they are not. While Minions continue having constant Looney Tunes style antics, especially during that whole sequence you see in one of the trailers where they're pretending to be, I think, like French or English guards taking on barbarians, and then through antics that would not be uncommon in a Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck short, just completely beat the tar out of them. And then here, like, throughout this whole thing, they summoned these two monsters. They even have, like, in this area where they summon the two monsters, a sign that says, warning, there are frozen monsters in here, do not thaw. And it's like, that's a Looney Tunes gag. they would absolutely do that. That where they would completely miss that sign. And like inherent danger that comes with this. And the Goomy is just like, oh yeah, these are like my best friends. They're good guys. Don't worry about it. Just don't look too delicious. And they're just like, wait, what? And then they summon them. And this is where I loved Bobby Moynihan as Phillips, and legendary voice actor Phil LaMarr as Howard, this tentacle monster. And how cool is that? Well, first of all, H.P. Lovecraft is a reference to these two monsters, Howard Phillips. And
that's clever.
And they're like, because Cthulhu's like all the tentacle stuff, so that's one of the monsters. But the other one is like based off of I think the fish people from Innsmouth, from that specific story of Lovecraft. And throughout the whole movie, Bobby Moynihan's character Phillips is wearing like this grass hula skirt and this seashell bra, which it's a guy, but he's constantly like adjusting it, like very Looney Tunes character stuff with these two villains. And like there's even like this whole moment where they have like the classic Scooby-Doo gag of where they're running through different doors and then they just kind of like lose track of who's running through what door and such at one moment. Great gag. But I think the greatest long running gag of this movie comes from Dort, Jesse Eisenberg's character. Because at first, you are introduced to Dort at the first official science, like sci-fi convention. You think he's just being like a dork. Like he's just a guy in a costume. And they keep that thought process in your head throughout most of the movie. Which is great because the minions are like, he lives in a very small apartment. He lives with a roommate. His throne room is a bathroom. I guess this is what it's all about. Okay, weird. All right. And the first moment of them taking over the world with Dort is Dort putting down his flag in a kid's sandcastle in a sandbox at a playground. And throughout that whole sequence, the kid is upset and he's trying to like hurt Dort until Dort runs into Debbie, Zoe Dutch's character, which, man, Zoe Dutch is having a heck of a year so far this year. Especially with the fact that new movie of hers is coming out.
Oh, yeah.
Let me just say it because I don't know how big of a release it's getting. It's Sony Pictures Classics. You know how it is. Gail Daltrey and the Celebrity Sex Pass, which is at my theater. I am so excited. I've heard nothing but good things about it. This is why it's important as an animation fan to watch non-animation things, because then you find more great movies to talk about. A lot of people kind of weirdly took this scene out of context, thinking that the minions were going to villainize Zoe Dutch's character, Debbie, because she was a suffragette, fighting for women's rights to vote and such. And it begins this weird little subplot romance between Debbie and Dort. And again, you think that throughout this whole movie, Dort is a guy in a costume. And that he's just extremely committed to the bit. Until we get to the part after where Goomy, Howard, and Phillips summon the big eyeball monster, Irene, which I'm sure is a reference to some sci-fi stuff, because it's not a reference to the song Come On Eileen. Or maybe it is. So it's like stopping the giant monsters, more Looney Tunes shenanigans. Dort is told by Debbie to Dort, you gotta do something about this. Right. He bails on the situation. You think it's gonna go through some kind of I'm not really a robot, I'm a guy in a costume. Plot twist. Dort's an actual alien robot. I laughed so hard when he came back to save the day in actual UFO ships with the minions. And there are so many little sight gags throughout this whole sequence of the minions. One of them's running in their UFO like a hamster wheel. Two of them are treating it like a jacuzzi. And I'm just so happy that they flipped the trope of I'm a guy in a costume, I'm not really a bad guy. No, he's an actual alien robot. I love that gag.
It is so good. And even the sequence of him and the other minions marching down the street, which again they showed in the trailer, but stuff like that is still fun. Another great example of just great character animation.
The best gag though and they don't explain it at all, which I'm so happy that they just let this unhinged joke get through, is once James get his monster movie made, everyone in the theater is clapping, and like the two bosses of the film studio are there. Every side character is there, and you see Dort and Debbie. Debbie is holding a walkie-talkie like it's a baby, and Dort is like, "What a great movie, Minions! Fun for the whole family." And there's a robot dog and a robot kid. I am not going to ask how that large walkie-talkie is going to turn into a kid. Don't ask. It's that level of Teen Titans Go, don't give a fuck energy. That's like what people love. It's that kind of comedy that makes me laugh.
Yep.
It's like when Teen Titans Go to the movies where they try to have like the big wrap-up sequence while the credits are rolling. It's like, yeah, Robin, you learned your lesson. That's great. And like Robin's like, no, I got to say something to the audience. And then he just latches onto the screen. It's like, quick, kids, ask your parents where babies come from. It's like, that energy is missing in so much animation these days, especially from US animation. Because this is like no different than what you see in European animation or like when it's really good Japanese animation. And again, I think it is, like you said, Brie, this movie is so French-coded.
It's Frenchiest French.
Yeah, exactly. And
one more thing I have to mention, John Powell's score goes so much harder than it has to. I need to pull up exactly what I said in my review, but basically I said I have to give props to John Powell for really understanding the assignment. Like, yes, I know a lot of the Despicable Me franchise is like really tied to Hader Pereira's score, but Powell does this thing where he's basically channeling both Carl Stalling and John Williams at the same time.
It's a very good score. And once again, this movie just has really good animation. Illumination's at that point where they're making movies on par visually with Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks. And yet, Illumination is still that one studio that could do texture work way better than I think a lot of what Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks can do. Because the way that they do textures for certain dresses and outfits and just for certain items and objects in the movie, it's so creepily like, it's like you could literally reach through the screen and feel it kind of thing. Or it's like, this is the lighting that it would look like from a screening of a movie from back then. They even get the black and white shot on film look with all the same little artifacts popping in and out all over the place also. It's just, I can't believe I'm gushing this much about a Despicable Me movie, which I don't think we've done since 2022.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And this just makes me raise the question, and maybe I'm overreaching and overthinking it. Could Illumination have a possible Oscar chance with this getting Best Animated Feature?
You know what? I'm going to say the answer to that is non-zero. Because, yeah, the last time that an Illumination movie ever, not just Despicable Me, but the last time an Illumination movie entered that category was Despicable Me 2.
Yeah, like that was 13 years ago. Because...
Jesus.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And it was their only time to be nominated for Best Animated Feature. Because here's the thing. I said this last time, in the last episode. Are we living in a reality where Toy Story 5 gets nominated? And I am still saying yes to that, just because of the stranglehold that Toy Story as a franchise has on the voters. But that means if we're not careful, if the foreign animation scene is not careful, we're probably not going to get... I'm just saying this because who knows? With the acclaimed 5-minute standing ovation that Forgotten Island got at Annecy, they're probably going to put all their clams in that bucket for Best Animated Feature.
Probably.
But this one does have the advantage of being a love letter to cinema, way more than Babylon. To me, well, I didn't like Babylon. I understand why people loved it. I thought it was annoying and tedious. But Hollywood does like that. Like, the voters do love Ode to Old Hollywood and such. And it's just interesting to think about that we could have a possibility of an Illumination nomination. So that would mean that, like, because let's put out, like, the three obvious ones. It's probably going to be Forgotten Island. It's probably going to be Wildwood. And it's going to be Hoppers.
Yep.
That means that technically, depending on how Hexed goes, which I don't think Hex is going to make it.
No.
No. And correct me if I'm wrong. I forget. Did Inside Out 2 make it?
Yes. Inside Out 2 did make it, but it lost to Flow.
Okay, I just couldn't remember.
Nah, you're good. Like, from that year, it was Memoir of a Snail, Flow, Inside Out 2, The Wild Robot, and Flow, and Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Foul. So that would mean that we could either see a full US, quote unquote, because of, eliminations in France. We could see a whole shutout of foreign animation this year. That means Shaun the Sheep, The Beast of Mossy Bottom doesn't make it. Tangled doesn't make it. In Waves doesn't make it. Any other amazing animated features from overseas don't make it.
And I think, unfortunately, for this year, a very likely possibility.
I don't like that just because of my love and support for foreign animation. Because I want to see voters move away from thinking they need to give Disney 2 or 3 spots. Because we were so good at that. We've been so good at that. For the last 1, 2, 3, 4 years now, they've been giving it less to Disney or Pixar. Like, I just feel like with this year, and maybe I am incorrect with checking the vibe for Toy Story 5, because I know people like that movie, but I also just think its legacy is being quickly its impact on this year is being forgotten because it's becoming more of a financial hit, but I don't see people talking about it as much because there's probably just not that much to talk about. Like, Hoppers has the weird, absurd comedy of it, and the whole sequence where the main character accidentally kills Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, that's the thing that's throwing me off, that we could see a full shutout, because depending on how things go with Disney, they're probably going to be gunning for 2 of those spots, while DreamWorks going to gun for one of them, and we know Laika is heavily popular with voters, so we know Wildwood's going to be there.
I think we should revisit this question when the lineup for Animation is Film is announced, because I'm assuming by then some of these titles that we're kind of waiting for distribution on will have hopefully been grabbed by then.
We'll see, because there's a lot of good ones that, well, honestly, if Sony Pictures Classics plays their card right, they could get their first nomination for Best Animated Feature since 2016, because they are the distributor behind Le Corset, and they released a trailer for that today. It looks amazing, and it's the biggest winner out of Annecy. How do we feel so far with the possibility that we might get a whole US shutout? I mean, the US animation shutting out everyone else.
I mean, I think unless there's something that's like a flow this year, I feel like it's one of those years. Just because I feel like the last couple years have just been so strong for US animation that I kind of feel like the barrier for foreign is slowly being raised back up again.
Unfortunately, that might be the case.
Well, that's the only thing I can explain, is because that's the only reason why I think Elio got through. Because they were like, okay, we know it's going to K-pop Demon Hunters. I guess we can go and give...
I mean, Elio was the pity vote. Let's be real.
It was. Even though they could have given it to 100 Meters, a much more popular movie on Letterboxd than Elio, because they had Arco and Little Amelie on there. So... And then the year before, they had Wallace and Gromit, Memoir of a Snail, and Flow, which, of course, Flow won. But that was because the foreign animation scene was kind of weak that year. Even though I love Flow and Memoirs of a Snail. Fantastic movies. And then the year before that, of course, Miyazaki was there with The Boy and the Heron, Nimona, and Robot Dreams. So, yeah, I think we need to get back to this after Animation is Film is announced. Which should be relatively soon, either next month or the month after. So, it's usually around, like, a month out from when the festival is playing, which is from 16th through the 18th. we'll come back to that here. Otherwise, I really loved Minions and Monsters. It's one of my favorite experiences in animation this year. One of my favorite comedies of this year. If push comes to shove, if they really don't want to let a lot of foreign animation in, I wouldn't be mad if Minions and Monsters got in.
Same. Forgotten Island is kind of inevitable, but like if Universal wants to put some extra elbow grease into a campaign for Minions and Monsters, I wouldn't be against it.
Or they're going to treat it like that one sequence with the two studio bosses saying, "You guys will never work in Hollywood again, but keep in touch with us. We'll be friends that don't talk to one another." So next time, it's kind of up in the air. We got a lot of stuff happening. We're probably going to cover Cocoon and The Last Blossom because put that foreign animation into our veins, baby. Who knows? We could also be talking about Avatar. So we'll just leave it up in the air. We'll just see what happens.
But until next time, Bree, where can everyone find you online?
On the greater part of the interwebs, you can find me at crazylemur.bsky.social. I'm also on Instagram at LemursRoll1, which, by the way, Meta's doing fucked up shit again. Be sure to go to your settings and disable so they can't make AI slop out of your children's pictures or whatever. So, yeah, that's my little PSA. Fuck Meta.
Agreed. And Cameron, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on the interwebs. At Blue Sky, at camsideview.biz. I have my own website called camsideview.biz where I review animated films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. And I am a contributor to Media Magpies, your new one-stop shop for pop culture editorials about the wider world of movies, TV, video games, and pop culture. I am currently writing an editorial right now about the stupid discourse about adults who are way too passionately defending the Super Mario Galaxy movie and why the references and fan service in Minions and Monsters compared to Super Mario Galaxy movies references and fan service are not the fucking same. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/CamsideView. That's where you can find me.
And you guys can find me on various social media sites at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/CoachK42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Blue Sky at Renegade Pop Culture. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Renegade Pop Culture or Organized Zero. Find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Renegade Pop Culture. Find us on Podchaser. Consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/Renegade Pop Culture. Listen to all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. Need an escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.